From the taking of sides in the separation debate to time change on the possible chopping block, getting ready for the Paralympics, and an Alberta bid to host the Hockey World Cup. Our Primetime This Week panel is in, and joining us this evening, Bob Sumner, former 30-year news veteran, now a media and communications consultant, and Alex Boyd, Alberta-based national reporter for the Toronto Star. Good evening to you both, and let's begin with the dueling debate over separation. In one area of Edmonton Thursday, signature collection for leaving.
I don't understand the people that don't like this idea, because Alberta will be the richest country in the world almost. We would be so much better off with our health care and pensions and the works.
Now across town in the Alberta capital, a whole different perspective.
We were hoping that this issue would be resolved in the legislature by a simple vote, but it appears that through a number of rule changes by our Alberta government, we are now heading towards a referendum in October.
Forever Canadian completed its own successful petition drive last fall. Now it's preparing to ramp up efforts again, and it will have the support of a group representing 260,000 French Albertans who fear lost protections in an independent Alberta.
This is why we're here today, to ensure that our rights are protected for today and the future.
We're not only going to win this referendum, we are going to win this referendum decisively, so we will put separatism to bed once and for all in Alberta.
A petition organized by separatist group Stay Free Alberta is now in its third month of collecting signatures. Alex, I'll go to you first. What's to be made of the degree of organization already building on either side of the separation debate? We've not yet even arrived at the stage of a possible referendum.
I mean, it maybe feels surprising, but it probably shouldn't be. Sorry, my dog is barking. But, you know, Tomek Lukazik has been pretty clear about this from the very beginning, which is that he hoped that his petition would put this issue to bed. But if it didn't, if Alberta actually went to a referendum, he wanted to make sure that he was ready to fight that fight. Because, you know, all of the work that goes into a campaign, you know, getting people organized, getting people out, getting good information to people who need it, all of that takes time, it takes resources. And it isn't built overnight. And so, you know, if we look to Quebec, we know that campaigns matter. And so what we're seeing now is probably, you know, some of the fruits of that work, the organizing that he's doing, pivoting into, you know, more obvious preparation for an actual referendum campaign.
Bob, how do you see the next 7 months playing out if, in fact, Albertans vote on separation as one of the many questions set for the October referendum?
Well, I think the Stampede Parade breakfasts are going to be busy with everybody, and they'll be out in full force. You can't, like, you see them all over the place driving up here on Thursday. You could see people around, and I think everyone's going to ramp it up. I can see. I'm glad that Lukazik's got more people coming on his side. The most important thing is that people are, if it's a traditional vote, people have to get out and vote, and that's the only way to make sure that we can put this to bed.
Alex, I'll ask you, we had Chief McCurdy off the top. How do you see the Indigenous voice factoring into this equation?
You know, it doesn't feel like they've been hugely consulted by the separatism side of things. Like, one of the interesting kind of conflicts here, I think, is that Jeff Rath, who's one of the most vocal, you know, separatists that we've heard from in recent months, is himself a treaty lawyer and has kind of said, you know what, this is a great opportunity for an independent Alberta to reset relationships with First Nations in the province. But then you hear from people like Chief McCurdy saying, you know what, no one asked us, and we're not necessarily on board with this. So they're a big voice here. They're an important voice here. And it doesn't sound like they've been hugely included thus far.
All right. Next up for us, renewed discussions in our province over doing away with the twice yearly clock changes. And it's a conversation prompted by our neighbors next door.
Someone's got to go first, and I think it's an opportunity for us to do that.
On Monday, the BC government announced that this weekend will be the last time residents spring their clocks ahead, locking in on daylight time.
Doing this spring forward, fall back is not a good thing for our body. So we've been doing this now in Alberta since 1972. And we know there's acute harm that comes with that spring forward in March. just in the fall, when we fall back, we all get a little bit of extra time, that extra hour, but it's also realigning our circadian clocks with our day-night and with the work schedules.
Well, the Alberta government says it will consult on ending the spring forward fall back practice. The Premier says she prefers moving to permanent daylight time.
I like more sunlight at night, and I think most people do too, because we are on daylight 8 months out of the year. So going to standard 12 months out of the year would be a big adjustment for people. And so that would be one of my considerations.
In a 2021 referendum, just over half of voting Albertans said no to adopting daylight time. Bob, if Alberta is to make a change, should it be as simple as consulting Albertans and then, like BC, simply announcing it? Or does this warrant yet another referendum question come the fall?
Well, we elect these governments to make decisions, so maybe they should just make a decision and we'll just go with it. I would, I think I heard that the Cranbrook, the East Kootenays is going to stay on whatever time we're on. So I don't know, it just seems to be getting all muddled up, but they could just make a decision and just adopt it like EB seems to have done. But.
Alex, we heard from the Premier there. I'll ask you, if you had a preference, would it be daylight or standard time year round?
God, I have so much trouble kind of unlocking this in my head, but I think what I would like is savings time, which is essentially I want summertime. I want more time in the evenings as opposed to more daylight in the mornings in the winter. And Smith, makes a good point here, I think, because I think we focus a lot on kind of the psychological toll of having to switch twice a year and maybe less on kind of, well, when do we actually want our sunlight and what do you actually want your day to look like? Because, the switch twice a year, feels very upsetting and is very tough for the week that you have to do it. But the amount of daylight you have in the day is something that we're going to have to deal with much longer. So that feels like something, I don't know if it's a referendum, I don't know if it's public consultation, but it's going to have to be something that I think we think about pretty seriously.
Bob, how do you feel about the twice yearly time change? And if it is that we drop that, do you have a preference?
I would pick daylight, although I would miss that roll back in the fall and the extra bit of sleep. But I think it makes more sense to stick on daylight savings. And as everyone has said, it's like 8 months a year, so what's another 4 months? And I don't remember a time when we didn't switch. So I must not have been paying attention in before 1972.
It's a while ago.
Yeah.
That is for sure. Okay, time for us, speaking of time for us to take a bit of a break. But when we come back, getting hooked on sledge hockey and an Alberta bid to host the best in the world. More from our Primetime This Week panel in a moment. Welcome back. The Milano Cortina Paralympic Winter Games are underway as of today, serving up a healthy dose of inspiration for the next generation here at home in Alberta. Athletes like Alana Ma, who knew sledge hockey was her sport the first time she hit the ice at the age of 7.
It just felt so freeing, and I was just ripping around on the ice, and it was never anything I've ever done before.
And it's a game filled with speed and intensity, which did not come as a surprise to Boris Rebelka, who, after 3 decades of coaching junior hockey in Alberta, is now behind the para-hockey bench.
And it wasn't catching me off guard, but impressed me was what shape they're in. They are top-notch athletes, world-class athletes.
That's also what is also, though, standing out for Rebecca is efforts to grow the game with programs right across the country for the next generation.
Any young athlete, the aspirations of, I want to put the maple leaf on and play for my country, well, they're going to start learning at a young age, so they have that opportunity to be able to play for their country.
It's nice to see what you can do or how far you can go in the sport.
Well, the men hit the ice Saturday at the Paralympics. Players hope to also see a women's division added to the Paralympics in 2030. Bob, para-hockey players at the highest level, they can fire the puck at 100 kilometers an hour, and that's with either hand. Is this a sport that gets the respect it deserves?
I think it does get some respect, but probably not as much as it should. And I seem to remember a Ryan Stashnicki that was in the Humboldt, but he tried to go play sledge hockey, and he said, wow, these guys are in good shape. So I think it's pretty you could just see the joy on everyone's face there, how much fun they're having. So I think it deserves more respect, and we should be paying more attention to it.
Alex, we see there that there are efforts to grow the game at the grassroots, a sign that there truly is a sport for everyone, especially where youth are concerned.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's great to see efforts to get people out and introduced to the game early, which is obviously a big part of playing it at a high level. And I think a big part of kind of shifting it is changing how we frame parasports sometimes. Because I think, there's a long history of people viewing the Paralympics and sports like this as just kind of a nice thing that people do. And isn't it nice that people with disabilities get out, rather than seeing it as, elite athletes performing at a very, very high level. And I think, getting people out and actually trying it and seeing just how difficult it is a big part of that.
Yeah, and Bob, with that in mind, high time the Paralympics expanded to include a women's division.
Yeah.
Canada does have a national women's team.
Yeah, definitely. It should be inclusive for everybody, anyone that wants to try it. So I'm all for it. I hope that they do create a women's division at that level.
Yeah, and Alex, overall, what's your hope for Canadians' embrace of the Paralympic Winter Games now that they're getting underway? It was just a couple weeks back we were paying so much attention to the Olympics. How about now?
Yeah, I hope people, make the time to watch it, to support the athletes. It's very, very cool sport at very high level. There's also sports you don't see in the Olympics, like, for example, goalball, which is a game for people who are visually impaired, where the ball actually makes a noise. So it's totally based on listening. The audience has to be totally silent, but it's still, super fast, super exciting. So there's just a lot of very cool stuff to make time for and to watch.
There are a bunch of Albertans taking part, not just Boris Rubelka, as we saw a moment ago, but athletes as well. All right, speaking of hockey, the NHL's World Cup of Hockey is set to return in 2028, and that's piquing interest right here in Alberta, especially with Calgary's new arena really starting to take shape and expected to be ready for the start of the 2027-28 hockey season.
Very much in support of a potential bid. I think it would be very exciting to be able to welcome the world for this event.
Calgary, part of a joint bid with Edmonton to host the event, the next best opportunity for a post-Olympics Canada-US rematch, and the provincial government kicking in $15 million to assist with the bid.
It's going to be, I think, the second most watched sporting event in the world when it comes to hockey. So we're crossing our fingers and hoping that the NHL Players Association, as well as the owners, make a decision for the Calgary-Edmonton bid.
And hosting the World Cup of Hockey has the potential to pack a punch.
This would genuinely bring visitors from all over the world to come and watch the highest level of best on best hockey. When you start to talk about economic impact for this would be enormous. This would be, north of 200 million type impact.
Now, there was anticipation of a possible announcement when NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman paid a visit to Calgary this week, but it looks like Albertans will have to wait.
I'm aware of the bid. Bids are being evaluated. Nothing has been finalized. But it was a good bid. I'm not prepared to tell you today that it was or was not the winning bid, but certainly it's a bid that people could be very proud of.
Yeah, an announcement on the winning bid now expected in a couple weeks' time. Alex, is there any place better than Alberta to host the World Cup of Hockey? What do you make of the value of a joint Calgary-Edmonton bid with backing from the province?
I mean, both cities either have or are set to have very nice arenas. We could certainly put those to good use. There's undeniably an economic impact to consider here. I also almost wonder about the political impact. Like, Calgary, for example, got very serious about an Olympic bid for 2026, obviously didn't go forward. But something that's been discussed a lot in certain circles in Calgary in recent weeks is if Calgary had played host to a sporting event of this magnitude, would separatism be the same conversation if we, were on display as a major city, as a big part of Canada, as a host for the world? And so I also think, considering the political impact or how this makes Albertans see themselves is also something that's on the table here.
Bob, not to be a downer, but how disappointing would it be if the Alberta bid is ultimately overlooked, especially considering none of the FIFA World Cup soccer games are coming to this province when Canada jointly shares hosting duties this summer?
Well, it definitely would be disappointing, but you can't win them all. But I hope we get it, because it'd be great for the province and the country. Both cities would all benefit from it, and we could all hold our heads high and say we did it. But let's see what happens. I'm not going to get too excited. 2 weeks away, find out what happens.
Well, we have two great NHL teams. Think of what it would be to have the best on best right here in both of our big cities. All right, folks, I do believe we're out of time. We'll have to leave it there, leave winners and losers for another week. Thank you both. Hope you have an awesome weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.